You're muted, Eric.
You're muted, Eric.
All right, we're recording. Did you want to kick us off, Luke? You want me to? You want to intro it?
You can go ahead, or I'll give an intro. Today is Tuesday, let's see, December 15th. We're here for our block producer meeting. We've got a lot to cover today, probably more than we can actually cover in this meeting. The major topics are our next release. There's a lot of detail in that. It includes table migrations and some pretty serious stuff. So we really hope that you all can take a deep dive into this. Obviously, the testnet and the mainnet are your guys' responsibility. And so, we're providing this code, but obviously you guys have to sign off on it and be excited about it. So we're going to go as far as we can. Eric's got a presentation prepared to explain this next release. And then the other topic, hopefully we'll have time for, I know it's really important, is that the block producer reserves initially set up in the chain, 10 million tokens that are minted by the chain, are now depleted. So we have a conversation to be had as a community to how we want to make sure you guys are all well incentivized and financially rewarded for your efforts. And so that's a conversation that's pretty important to have. Hopefully we can tack that on after Eric's presentation. Is that a pretty good intro?
Sounds good. Thanks, Luke. I'm just going to keep an eye on people still coming in here. So yeah, I'll start off with the upcoming release. We're calling this a Bravo release. It's a contract only release, but it is, I'm going to share my desktop here. And if anyone pings you that they're in the waiting room, let me know and I'll let them in. Wait, now I need the participant list. All right, I'm set up here. I'll keep an eye on that. So I'll walk through this upcoming release, the Bravo release. Excuse me. It is tied to a chain release as well as usual. We haven't had a chain release in a while. We've been on 2.0.x for some time. That is coming out probably in January as well. So they are tied together, but I'll mainly be focusing on the upcoming contract release for this one. And we'll set up a different meeting to really talk about the chain release and how that, what that adds on as well. So I'm going to go through a few different views of our releases that you have access to. These are mostly on Atlassian out there. Oh, that's nice. Actually pops up on your screen now. That's pretty nice. So I'm going to go through a few different views of this release. I've been trying to break down these releases when I get questions from the BPs like, what is the endpoint? How does it affect me? Or what is the action? How does it affect me? I'm trying to get those sorted into a view that makes it easier to absorb for everyone, because I know that we kind of fly through these sometimes. So this is the first, this is just the roadmap view, again, out on Atlassian. It should be open to anyone, I believe, even if you don't have an account, but most of you should probably have accounts there. It lists out the, just on the big picture, what we're talking about here. This first stack of bars here is this release, this Bravo release. And I'll go through the FIPS that are included with it in a second here. The second piece, so if I broke it down into different chunks, we got this Bravo release. Then we have some other items that are in the works that are more in the R&D phase. And those are staking, as we were discussing in the channel earlier, that staking got pulled back. That's what we were going to release last week. We were working frantically on that. But if you design it and other issues got involved with that, and we can dig into those if there are questions on those, and maybe Pavo can address those. I can't remember if we did that in the last meeting. There's also token wrapping, and that's going to be worked on as well. So there's this chunk of new features, the security of querying the FIO chain, something that Todd would be working on. We then have this next group of bars, which is our, I'll call it, it's the Bahamas release now. So the chain and contract code have different code names right now. One will be the military alphabet, one is the countries. So they just happen to both be at B's right now, but they'll quickly diverge. So this is the Bahamas release for the chain, and it has a lot of the new getter endpoints, obviously, for these, all the previous items we've added in, all the FIPS we've added in on previous contract releases. And then we can, then there's a whole slew of kind of offline improvements we're trying to make to like our SDKs and things like that that I won't go into. So that's one view. I think this is a helpful view for all of us So I starting at the bottom, I tried to backtrack because a lot of what's starting to happen is it's almost like a compatibility matrix. Like if you want to go in and set up your own DevNet or developer build on your machine, what do I use? What branches do I use? So it hasn't been as clean as it could be in the past. DevTools, we're still trying to get in line since we've been constantly updating that. So right now we are, our previous release was this V22 release. And now we're on this Bravo release. This is the one we're going to be releasing hopefully to testnet very soon. I have the, this is a contracts only release. Here are the FIPs that are involved. So it's FIP 1B, which is transfer address. Again, along with transfer address, the big piece of this that's made it complex is the optimizations around all of the FIO requests and OBT records that we were having. Those were in 3 tables, and we'll go into that, and we're migrating that to 1 single table. But there are some performance issues within wallets and just in general when doing lookups on those and timeouts. So that's a dual release, I should say, 1B is. And it's limited on what can happen with transfer address. I think this is important to note for this first contract release, because we haven't done the optimizations and the migrations that this depends on yet. We wanted to enable an initial transfer address for special cases. So in this release only will only allow the transfer of an address on accounts with no OBT or existing OBT or request data. So it won't be a general ability to transfer used addresses. That has to wait until we actually get the chain out and do the table migrations, if that makes sense. So important to note there. FIP6, the transfer of locked tokens. Again, this was part of what was going to go out last week with staking, but it has other uses. I posted that out to the Telegram as well. And again, we'll get through these, and if there's questions on any of them specifically, we can answer those questions, but I'm going to fly through it a little bit here. The ability to vote in proxy without a FIO address, I believe that was a BP-centric request originally. And the ability to add, buy and add bundled transactions as a separate transaction. And then the chain level public addresses, which again was discussed just recently on the Telegram channel, where you can add a star in for all the ERC20 tokens, say, on an ETH chain. So you don't have to add those separately. So I think that's very important for our wallet partners. Again, so if you ever wanted to go out and test these, this is the current set of branches you'd have to set up to run and test on. Let's just quickly go through. So here's the chain code. And again, here we get more into new endpoints and getters that are associated with all these actions down here, and then a set of modified actions. I'll get a little more into that in a second, because I know the main question you guys have is, I have all these scripts, how are these actions getting modified? How will that impact me, impact my scripts? So here's a slew. Why there are more FIPs here is because we haven't released the chain code in a while, and all our previous contract releases where we were doing like burn FIO address came out in the last contract release. We haven't released the endpoints for that. So we'll finally get to the getter for burn FIO address released in this chain code. And then we are mapping out some of these future, the table migration actually is a 3-part contract release. So when you see migration part 2 and part 3, and we'll get into that when we talk about the migration in general. So I think this is a helpful master kind of view of our releases and what's coming out, what actions and what endpoints. I did also, because this didn't have that type of detail, here's Bravo specifically. And again, if I go back to the pages, this is the important piece where these are. It's called project pages. So if you go out to our Kanban board or something like, or whatever, under the development project, it's these project pages, and you'll see all these laid out here. We have these development documents that are active. So some of these will be very specific to the FIPS, mainly under the development documents. And then these release items, like this master release plan, is under this releases directory as well. And I will also have these specific Bravo releases. And what I'm about to show you is, we have a bunch of checklists that we do when we actually do releases. We also have checklists for individual, say if I pull this up, so there's a milestone checklist here as well that we do for every release for just a specific project that makes the developers kind of go through all the unit testing and things like that. So, but anyhow, out on those pages is where all this stuff can be found. I can send links to it anytime if you're having trouble finding it. I know Atlassian can be a little, there's a lot on Atlassian right now with all the different marketing and development and groups. So if you can't find stuff, just let me know. So this release summary for Bravo. So for the current release, and again, I'm not going to go into detail on this because we have limited time, but here is where I will try to, for every release, I'm pulling stuff in really. If you went to the FIP, you would find most of this detail out there. But it's just good to summarize when you're asking, what are the new actions and how do they impact me? So that's what I'm trying to do here. And I just break it down, transfer lock tokens, creates a new table. What's the structure of that table? Just some stuff to think about. And if more detail would help here, just let me know when you're looking through that. Obviously, this will be a larger table for the chain code, which is really probably where you all will be impacted with some of those getters and what's returned. So, it is good to know that you can now, you might have different return type strings coming back from add address or things like that, or FIO address. So here's breaking down vote proxy. The FIO address can now be left blank, just stuff like that. So that is my breakdown. For the release in general. Any questions before we dig into the details on the table migration?
Yeah, what's the plan for the release date?
We are in final DevNet testing now. That usually means we're about 3 or 4 days out. I won't release it on Friday. That would put us on Friday, I think, is when we're going to release this. No, just kidding.
Yeah, that's the right day.
Yeah, so,
Like
that usually puts us 3 or 4 days out. So I don't think we'll make it by tomorrow. Which would be when I would want to release that, or Thursday. So maybe Thursday, we'll see how the testing goes, but if not, early next week for testnet.
Okay, so that means next week we can start testing it on testnet.
Yeah.
Because I'll also need to practice the table migration because I've been reading the process and one block producer had to take the lead. So we need to careful.
That.
Yeah. That's an interesting process.
I know, it'll be interesting.
So
yep. So
please go ahead.
Okay. Any other questions on the release in general or any of those features before we dig into the table migration? All right.
I want to ask in addition, like, is this useful? I mean, I personally think this is pretty exciting. Yeah, even just to kind of demonstrate what this project is doing, the activity that the dev team is putting out there, the organization we have professionally and all that. I think it's a really great example of the strength of what we've put together here. And I just, I want to make sure that, you guys feel empowered to share this with your community as well, to be like, hey, I'm proud to be a block producer on this project. Look at the level of professionalism and stuff. So I would love, actually, I'm looking forward to sharing this video, Eric, because you've just done such a great job of organizing this information that's really important for our network to be secure and continually evolving and improving. So hopefully this is useful. Also, I want to highlight top right here, you see that search bar, like I use that constantly. So when I'm like as Eric was saying, it can be hard to find stuff. If you just put in like release, for example, and then you see the 2 tabs, there's the Jira and the Confluence tab. Sometimes it's in Jira, as an issue, and sometimes it's so right there, you can just find stuff really easily, and you can look at, stuff pretty quickly just by using that search. So I found that to be very helpful. But thanks, Eric. Great stuff here.
Yeah. All right, we'll dig in then. Or any feedback from that question from Luke? Like, do you guys find it okay to access this stuff on Atlassian?
Yeah, it's very clear.
Okay.
It's been very helpful also to understand what is the process. So I found out that the description that you put and how is the migration process happening is very clear. We just need to practice it, and make it happen.
And make sure it's working. Make sure all the data migrates. Yes.
Yeah, that too.
The key. So
we probably need to think about a way to prepare, organize a backup in case we do the test in testnet and we just fuck up the testnet, because that's why we have a testnet, right? So not that, we understand that there are, some tables that are being modified and there might be unexpected issues. So yeah, that's good to plan in advance.
Yeah,
maybe.
great point. That we need a snapshot of testnet before we proceed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, all of the kind of prep stuff we may not have as detailed here, right? So that is great feedback that we'll need from you all to where do we need to be before we deploy this and start that migration? Who's going to do the migration if it makes sense to just have one BP doing it, and how are we going to confirm it? And Casey's was our lead engineer on this project. I'm going to have him walk through this, and then we can open it up to questions on some of those scripts. Yeah, I don't go into all the testing scripts we have for this, but and how we're on our verification scripts, but we can answer questions about that as well. So Casey, why don't you just walk us through what's going on here?
Yeah, my goal is for you guys not to fall asleep too, so try to keep this as simple as possible. But I mean, Joseph, you do bring up a good point with the snapshots. I think that if we utilize that, I made like a nuclear action that erases the new migration table and resets it. But if making a snapshot and then just replaying that is easier, I kind of like that approach for at least for testnet. But I did post that link to this document on the chat if you guys want to follow along. But this migration, it might seem complex, but the process, I think is pretty straightforward. There is 4 steps to this. The first step is the migration of the code. The second one is to getting all the endpoints to use that new table. The third one is to remove the old data that is in the old tables. And then the fourth one is a cleanup contract, which is pretty much just removing the references to that old table. So, that process is pretty simple, but, it can get pretty complicated once you kind of get into the code. And if anyone here wants, a code review or to kind of get into the weeds a little bit, feel free to reach out to me and I can do a little review for you if you guys need. But I'm going to kind of spend the most time, I think, kind of going through this first contract because that's kind of doing the grunt of the work. And as you probably guys already know, we use 3 tables to facilitate FIO requests. And the goal for at least this migration was to not only have lookups of owners, but to also migrate that data into one table. So this migration process is kind of copying over each table individually. And then at the end, it's kind of grabbing all the statuses and updating the statuses. And so this migration action that you see, this migrate TRX, when you first set this contract, nothing different is going to happen until a block producer in the top 21 calls this action. And once they call this action, it's basically just copying over the first record on the request table over. And then the BP or someone from our team or something can go ahead and kind of verify that one record has been processed. And once that one record has been processed, it kind of triggers a chain of events that allows all new transactions to now be placed in the old table and the new table. So you're going to have kind of a simultaneous migration without having to really do anything. And the job now is to have a volunteer block producer, or this could be done with multiple block producers, but I think just to have clean migration, I think it's probably beneficial to only have one. So if you're interested in that, reach out to either Eric or I or Luke or somebody, and we can kind of give you a little rundown of that process. But once that block producer calls that, all the new records are coming in. And then from that point on, they're able to call that transaction. And maybe you want to go down the list here a little bit, Eric, and to show the example of that action call. Now this action call, this example, no, you're passing it. There you go, step 1, actually, there you go. This migration transaction right here, you're only able to transfer 10 records at a time. So, if you put in there 500, you're going to be limited to only 10. So, right now we're seeing, 50 plus requests data, 20,000 plus OBT records. So, this process, we understand that it might take a little bit. We don't want it to just be on a cron job that's just running. We kind of want to have this done in a a linear kind of fashion, so we can kind of verify that the information is coming in. Let's see. Do you want to go over the other steps, Eric, or?
Yeah, no, I think it's good to just know what happens. So this first step you explained well, right? This is where the migration starts to happen. And as noted up here, after this release, all the data will still be, the getters still are pointing to the old tables.
Yep.
But yeah, and then I think what would be good to get into is like, because the question is this a forking change or is this not, kind of when that cutover needs to happen, for if people are running old nodes, what starts to happen, right? So maybe that's worth explaining.
So the step 2, we would never do this update until we're pretty confident that the data has been migrated, and there's a flag in that migration ledger. That's kind of a temporary table that is kind of keeping track of, when the new record started and if you've actually started the migration process and are you finished with it. And once the flag for finish is kind of is set, you'd want to make sure the data is copied over, but it's safe to say that the data, at least through the table wise and the status is it's been copied over successfully. And once that's happened, you can put out this FIO chain update that will update these 4 getter calls to use the references to the new table. And once that process is done, and you can be confident that all of your service providers that you're really wanting to support have done this update, you can then go into step 3, which is updating the contract to give the ability to a block producer to start removing records from the beginning of these tables. So once that process
change, right, Casey?
Yeah. So once that process has started, if there's a node that has not done an update, they will slowly see their records deplenish. So eventually, when all the records are being removed, when they query this table or these getter calls, they're going to see no request found or no pending transactions. So it's really important that they get this update done, but it's kind of on the block producer that's facilitating calling this migration transaction action to really see the impact on their side. So it's not really a forking change per se, but it is, I guess, a procedure change. I don't know how you'd.
Yeah, if I could unpack that a little bit. And so I think the foundation working with the team here is going to take a lot of responsibility to work with all of our integrated partners. And that includes wallets, exchanges, everyone that we know of that is relying on FIO node endpoints to say, one, if you're running your own node, have you upgraded? And we're basically going to pause this action until we have confirmation that they have upgraded. And then 2, obviously all the block producers, we want to make sure that all of you have upgraded. We're not gonna proceed forward until we know all of you have upgraded, because your API nodes, of course, are hard coded in many cases into these wallet builds, and they are, relying on those endpoints. So in some cases where a wallet is not running their own node, they don't have to do anything, which is great, because they're relying on you guys already. And as soon as you are all upgraded and we have a level of confidence that you're all hitting the new table, then we can start that process. And so we'll just, Eric's we've kind of done this a little bit already with the previous 2.0 upgrade. We'll just have a process where we're just, every exchange, every wallet that we know of, and we're going to put it out there on social as well to try to make sure people are up to speed for those that we don't know about. And of course, this video will help as well with that, to say, hey, here's the process. And until we have that confirmation, we're not going to move forward until we know everyone's hitting the new tables and we've verified all the data is integrous.
Does this have an impact on SDKs? I know it will on the go, but what about the others?
Yeah, on some of the getters, we reviewed most of those and we're adding fields. And I think when we discussed some of the specific ones, Todd, but we'll have to go through all those and make sure we haven't changed anything drastically. We usually try and add.
The responses are going to be the exact same. So when you do this step 2, if you were to call it on the old chain and then there's a node on the new chain, you would get the same results.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying, Todd. Just from a different table.
Well, I know that in some cases the Go SDK actually looks at the tables, not not the calls.
SDK looks
That
at
had
the
to do with a
calls.
lot of the performance issues that are now fixed. So I'll have to fix that.
Yeah, if you're looking at tables, definitely the, I mean, I think I had just randomly the table structures here of what some of these look like. I don't know if this is helpful. I was just using this for testing, but here's the FIO request. The current tables are these top 3. So, and then the new table, if I scroll down a bit here, this is the new table. So the structure is definitely going to be changing there, Todd.
That's a really good point, in that we should document that as part of our verification process with each one of our wallets and exchanges. Are you using our SDK? Are you upgraded to the latest SDK that queries the correct tables? Or are you, just hitting the endpoint directly, which in that case you should be fine? Or are you actually hitting, as Todd mentioned, directly the tables, in which case they would have to do a code upgrade. If they're not using our SDKs and they're manually hitting tables, they will have to upgrade their code. And that's actually a conversation, Eric, that we should start now. It's really good feedback.
Yeah, great point. Yeah,
That's a good point.
That's something VPs can help with too. I mean, we can monitor how often people are calling those get table calls directly on these tables that we're concerned with.
That would be fantastic, Nate. That's a great point. If you guys have aggregate data on those get table calls, that would be great. That would be really helpful. That would give us not just kind of like, we think we're okay, but that would give us definitive proof. Look, we haven't had a get table call on this for X amount of period of time. We feel pretty safe, and even tracking that over time as it changes, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not something that we're set up to kind of trend over time right now, but we could definitely spot check it at any time. We can get in there and see, if we think it's good, we can get in there and confirm at least.
I love that. I really like that we could actually confirm directly that it's the migration has happened in the SDKs and the integrations. Great stuff.
Yeah, great feedback. I really appreciate that. I guess we can go to the step 3 stuff real quick. This is the same action call. Basically, you're just going to call this until all the records in the tables have been removed. This one, I don't see it being one block producer needing to call it. This is reading just from the beginning of the table and erasing that entry, and you can only do 10 at a time. So I don't see an issue with any data getting erased twice. If you have a block producer calling at the same time, I don't see there's going to be any conflicts there. So that kind of leaves that last step, which is just removing the tables and the header files of the contracts. And that wraps up the migration. I think this has taken a lot of work and a lot of revisions. A lot of people on this call has had a lot of feedback in getting it to where it is today. So I appreciate each one of you guys. If there's any questions, reach out to me. If you want to get a little deeper, feel free to reach me out on Telegram or Discord.
Is it early to put a deployment date for the testnet on the calendar?
For the chain, for this piece?
Yeah, to try to make this happen on the testnet. If you guys feel like it's ready, we could try next week.
Oh, for the first contracts phase, yeah. We could put it on the calendar so everyone's ready and we can start the test. Absolutely. Just for the contract piece. This would just be the initial migration of the data. The getters wouldn't be changing because we're not releasing the chain at the same time. Is that what you mean, Rum?
Yes.
Is that Rum? Yeah.
Just remember, action will need to be taken once the contract is set. Well, that contract is deployed, we need to get moving.
I'm a dev manager. I don't give out exact dates. I just can't get those out, Roman, but I try.
I've been thinking a lot about those dates.
Let's target
for
that.
us,
Let's target. I mean, if everyone's around on Monday, that way we don't get it too jammed up against the weekend. I wouldn't want to do it Thursday, maybe. But if people are around next week, I'd be open to doing that. I don't know, Casey, your availability, but we'll try and get something on the calendar. I like that.
What complicates that is that would actually be Sunday evening for us. Would probably be the best time to start rolling that out because it won't deploy immediately, right? We'll have to generate the correct M6. So I would suggest we put it out Sunday evening.
So we'll figure that out.
I guess next week is almost, to the limit before Christmas, because then it gets really messy and complicated. So
That's my
But
word.
I'm available even on weekends if needed until, you know, it's Christmas. Then I will try to get a couple of weeks with family.
Yeah, Monday is a travel day for me, but I mean, I'm available on Sunday. I work for you guys, so.
Yeah,
I'm
we'll
here.
figure that out. And it's okay if it bakes in testnet for a while, and allows us plenty
Okay.
of time to test. So if that,
Cool.
I know we'll hit a lot of days where people may not be available, and we definitely don't want to go to mainnet during those days. So
No.
It might be a good plan to do the MSIG and then to test the other features, and then just have all the block producers kind of agree not to call that migration action until, you know, Monday or something too. It's a possibility.
okay.
We'll try and remember our Sunday evening is their Monday morning. Okay.
For some, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you hear that, Michael?
Is
All
there
right, any other
more
questions?
to the
Yeah.
bottom of the document, Eric? I know you had some more write-ups for steps
Yeah.
2 and 3. Yeah. Did you want to cover those at all? Or I think we already kind of covered it. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of
Yeah,
copied most of the stuff into the table, but yeah, any questions? That's great work, Casey. Amazing work. And let's open it up.
I'm just kind of curious, how much data is in testnet in these tables compared to mainnet? Like, is it going to be a pretty good test, or is there something we can do to try and get them
Get the
closer?
numbers.
Or
Yeah, that's a good point. I only looked at the Grafana on mainnet numbers. Maybe Todd might have a better sense of testnet.
I would stand the reason there'd be more on testnet.
I don't know. Testnet's quite a bit smaller now.
Yeah, since that reset.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd like us to get the, you know, pump some data in there to get it pretty close if we can. Great question, Nate. Because one of my, as Casey was walking through this for us earlier, one of my concerns was obviously performance, right? And on DevNet, we're not going to get the same level of testing ability that we're going to get on testnet, you know, with the, you know, the network delays and so many other things. There's a lot of assumptions that, you know, you can go at a certain number of records per call, for example, and that those calls are going to complete in time within a given block. You know, these are all things that I've been concerned about and I've asked questions about. And I think Casey's done a great job of kind of, you know, putting in the best guess there. But ultimately, you know, the rubber hits the road when we put it out on testnet and we try it. And we may run into a situation, and we've done this in the past where we had those things that we're going to, you know, we used to do things on block and we realized that was not a good plan. So we had to remove that once it hit testnet. We realized that that wasn't going to be efficient enough. So those are the type of things I'm hoping we can find out pretty quickly on testnet, you know, with that distributed network to say, okay, for the number of records we have and the network delays and everything, how long is this process going to take? How's the performance? Because another concern I have would be if this ends up being a heavy workload for the nodes, if that could in any way impact performance of the user experience connecting to do normal FIO interactions like requests and sends and things like that, that would be another thing we'd want to know about.
So right now we've got a difference of about 18,000 requests. So it's pretty substantial. I can smash testnet for a bit.
I was going to say, Todd, you could probably remedy that pretty quick, right?
Yeah.
I have some tools to play in that garden.
Yeah.
nice.
But at the same time, I'm not sure if you know, the process is going to be any different whether there's 20,000 or 40,000. I think just having a large number that's, you know, in the tens of thousands is probably going to be sufficient enough for a test net.
What did we test on DevNet, Casey?
I mean, in DevNet, we're in the thousands.
No, but I mean, but with your performance test, you shoved in about 20,000, didn't you?
Yeah. And there's no issue with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's like, 15,000 or something on that performance
50.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't need to be exact. I was just, you know, we don't want it to be like 100 on testnet and then
Yeah.
20,000 on mainnet or whatever.
Yeah, it's
Really?
about 1,500 on testnet is all. And
Yeah, let's
think-
throw some more in there. That's a great question, Nate. Any other questions on this? Because I was thinking about this also. You guys are familiar with the bike shedding problem, right? It's like every developer has an opinion on a bike shed because it's very simple. And it's like, it should be blue, it should be green and whatever. But then you ask for an opinion on a nuclear silo and it's like, Yeah, it looks great because like no one wants to like do the work of actually understanding nuclear physics, right? This is table migration is some of the most complicated things you can do in the EOSIO world. The number of people that have actually pulled it off well, is not everybody, right? And I'm really happy with what Casey's done so far. And I think it's a great process from what I've seen. And I really want to pause here just for a second and ask us all to go a little deeper onto the nuclear silo and less bike shedding on this particular release, because it's probably one of the most complicated things we've done, even though it's not a hard fork. And again, as Casey mentioned, if you want to walk through line by line the code, Casey did that with our team. I felt pretty good about the process after that, and we made some improvements even. So anyway, I just want to ask again if there's any other questions or even just concerns with the approach. Does this seem like the right approach? Do we feel good about this?
I think that's a good point to make, because as far as I know, I don't think there's ever been a table migration done at the system contract level on any chain that I'm aware of. The usual approach is to just keep adding more tables, like global is global's 2, global's 3.
We did it on Wax Testnet a few weeks ago, and we didn't tell anyone to see if anyone noticed, by the way.
Oh,
and not to mention
awesome,
we have 3 tables, that is sharing information that we're combining into one, which is it's a lot to manage. And I think it's a group effort, and I think we've all had a part in shaping this. So I appreciate everyone. Yeah. Thank you.
I know
more feedback is better. So
table migrations. He couldn't make the call today, but I'll ask him to provide his opinion on the general approach.
That'd be great.
And this is a little bit different than what we had originally in the plan. And Stan from Amsterdam had a lot of good feedback that kind of shaped this to use a lot of the methods that they've used on Wax. So this is great.
Yeah, I think this is a good approach. It seems really safe and calculated. So
excellent. That's the high level I was hoping for. No major red flags. And again, shout out to Stan. He's been really helpful. So great. I feel good about that. Are we ready to move on to the other part of the conversation, Eric, or is there anything else you want to cover? Anything else, Casey? Great job, Casey.
Nope, that's it from me, Luke. We can move on.
Yep, good for me. Thanks, guys.
All right, cool. So this is probably the part of the conversation that many of you are most interested in. And so I'm gonna just kind of lay a little backstory to this. As hopefully the mainnet chain launched with this concept of a block producer reserve. And as a utility-based system, the idea being as more people get FIO addresses and FIO domains, more of those utility fees are collected, there's going to be more revenue for the block producers. A full 85% right now of those fees go directly to the block producers, distributed in those 365 different buckets, so that the block producers who are, adding value today will also, have an incentive to stick around to receive the rewards over time. So these block producer reserves were set as 10 million tokens. And please correct me if I'm missing something, Eric or Pavo. My understanding is any transaction, organic transaction on chain that is short of 50,000 tokens worth of reward for a given day, that difference is kind of filled in by the block producer reserves. And these 10 million tokens are set aside and minted on chain for this purpose. Now, our hope was, that these tokens would last a long time, that we'd have millions and millions of FIO addresses and domains. Like anybody building a project, they get very excited about the potential to change the world overnight, right? Didn't exactly hit those numbers. We're not doing the level of address giveaways that we originally projected we might be able to. And so we're in a situation where we have, we don't have the level of on-chain activity that we were hoping. It's growing and it's looking great. Todd's built some really great tools with the graphs.FIO Protocol.io. If you haven't seen those already, you could see our number of active users and number of active requests and all that. Really cool activity. It's growing. It's moving in the right direction. But we have a situation where, we all have to get to work, basically. And this is the conversation I want to have with you in the community, in that we all have a responsibility for the kind of shared economic business model that the FIO chain has for us to make this work. And so I've shared some charts, I wrote some scripts to kind of evaluate the BP pay as it's been up to this point. And I was kind of like, on the day you claim, what was the token price, for example, and kind of get a US dollar terms. Hopefully you've all seen that. And, it ranges from around 200 to 280 bucks a day. In some cases, $60,000, $70,000 has been collected for the block producers. And I know that's a lot of money. And I also know you guys have a lot of costs. You've got teams of people, you've got server infrastructure, in some cases, significant globally distributed server infrastructure. And so what I wanted to have this, it's going to be an interesting conversation. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to go, but I wanted to have, and we've already been having this conversation in Telegram and Discord, but I want to have this kind of live conversation as well. And to discuss, what is the appropriate level? Because really it's a subsidization in a sense. The chain is subsidizing until we get to overcome this network effect that we want, the block production. And if it's appropriate to continue this subsidy in some way, I think the foundation can be requested by the block producers to do something of that nature, right? I think that's appropriate for us as the community treasury to be involved in those decisions. But I also want to learn from what we've done up to this point, right? That those tokens are also hitting the market. You guys obviously have expenses and everything like that. And some of you may be interested in diversification into other tokens. And that's something that impacts the whole community, right? And so we want to think through that subsidy being appropriate so that you are well incentivized, that we have the very best talent, that they're not like, hey guys, this is just not profitable for me, I need to move on to other things. But then also, and this is the part that I really want to get feedback from you all, the appropriate level of, for lack of a better word, like hunger, right? Like the desire to help grow this thing together. The early Bitcoin miners, they got nothing. Prior to the Bitcoin pizza of 10,000 Bitcoin for a pizza, these were just worthless tokens. And yet people decided to mine because they had a belief in the future. And I know a lot of you are on this call, not just because you know me personally and I invited you, but you believe in this technology. You believe in improving the experience of cryptocurrency in the world, and that FIO is a part of that, right? And so I want to find the right balance of like ensuring you guys are properly rewarded so that as, if the value of the network we're all building goes up, you all have an appropriate stake in the risk you took to be early adopters to support the chain. So that's kind of how I wanted to set up the conversation and get some feedback. Hopefully you guys have already been thinking about this. We've had a number of conversations in Discord and Telegram, and kind of think through, and Adam's made some interesting suggestions as well in terms of like allowing a way to adjust the amount of tokens that are distributed, have that fall off over time potentially. So this is kind of where we're at. To start off, are there any other questions about the BP reserves, how it's actually designed? I want to make sure we understand the mechanism before we start talking about improvements to the mechanism. So any questions just on BP reserves at all? As I've explained it, hopefully that made sense.
Well, I think part of this conversation happened on the last call where there seemed to be some support for giving part of the incentives to like incentivize users, or giving part of the rewards to incentivize users. So maybe just for the sake of reminding everyone, you could round out that part of this proposal too.
Yes, Roman, I'm glad you brought that up. We called that the co-op model. It was the idea that every token holder would be a participant in the FIO fee system, so that as you participate early on, you get a portion of any future fees that are generated by the network. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you look at it, we've talked at length with the business development team, the sales, marketing, and PR team about that co-op model. And although we did get a lot of great feedback from our advisors and investors, different people we've talked to about it, we also got a lot of feedback that it's really complicated. In its current model, in the current way that it was designed, it was going to be a lot of development code for one, and it was going to be very difficult in its current form to actually market effectively. People were having trouble understanding it. Our own team in sales and marketing and biz dev were having trouble, and this is through multiple meetings, to even understand it. And we got to the point where it's like, this is not the lowest level hanging fruit. This will take many months of development and testing, and we have no guarantee it will actually work. So as a team, as a steering committee, we decided we're going to reprioritize and not work on co-op today. So in that discussion, we talked about, hey, we can definitely kind of take some tokens set aside for address giveaways, which we'd be doing less of, put them over into the BP reserve bucket, decrease the amount of rewards in fees that are currently set to 85, we talked about bringing that to, I mean, there were numbers talking about, but decreasing that in order to have a portion of fees rewarded to users. So because that's not part of this discussion, we're kind of in a different place now where we're like, okay, if we were to refill the block producer reserves without this incentive change that goes to the users, we have to have a justification for that, right? We have to explain why as a community that makes sense. And so, yeah, that's a good point to bring up. As far as currently, we're not doing the co-op model, even though we did discuss that in the last meeting as we looked into the development. Now, again, I invite, the FIP is written, I invite any of and all of you, if you want to continue with that, even though we as a foundation has decided to pause on it, you're more than willing to continue prototyping and thinking it through. But at this stage, you guys, I think we need a quicker solution. Basically, we can't wait months for that to be developed and deployed.
And if I can chime in here, Luke, as well. So even though the FIO co-op is not, we're not, it's basically deferred status as a FIP. There is work progressing on staking, which potentially, and this is still early discussion, but there is discussion of potentially diverting some of the fees that are being collected on the chain. So reducing that 85% to something smaller and actually directing that amount to staking rewards for end users. So I think that should probably, even though that is still early on and still being discussed, but should potentially be considered in this discussion as well.
Great point, Pablo. So basically staking would be a simplified version of the co-op model where you stake your tokens and you're voting, which is an important part of that. And that's another reason we didn't end up going with that other FIP is we needed staking to be not just something you do, but something that adds value to the network. As we researched the different staking models, that was an important criteria for a number of reasons. So you would have to be voting and adding value to secure the network, and therefore you get this reward. And we wanted to make that be something that's sustainable so that ultimately it would pull from fees as well. So with all of that aside, today we're at a situation where the BP reserves are now depleted, and coming up with a number that we feel is appropriate as a community at our current stage of adoption and usage on chain is kind of the point of the conversation of where we're at. So I guess I'll start with a question. My wife always says I have to ask better questions. Have you all had a chance to look at some of the discussion that's been having? Hopefully you have. And from that, has it generated any questions you'd like to share with the rest of the community?
Well, I already wrote on Discord my thoughts about it. One of the points is what I mentioned. Not all the block producers here are also on EOS, which is a huge source of income for many block producers. So it's something to take into account. The cost of the operation and for those block producers that are not there. So the good news here is the BP bucket is depleted, but we're still getting rewards. And this is a nice surprise because that means the chain is used, and that means the economic model is viable. I understand that in an ideal world, we might have more users, but the chain has been up for less than a year, and we're already covering like 1/10 of the previous rewards, and that's a lot. I think that's a unique achievement among EOS IO chains. There is no other chain that is actually being able to pay rewards to block producers without inflation. That's amazing. So the only thing here is that we need to keep investing in get users and getting used. So, but this will take time. I don't think we're going to grow like tenfold in a few months. Being realistic. So, yeah, I think that we need the foundation to step in and provide some funding, but doesn't have to be the same way. I like what Wax is doing that allows to block producers to claim rewards that are directly staked. So you can, after that, claim rewards for staking. So maybe, you know, for the daily rewards, one part goes to liquid and one part goes to 3 months stake, 6 months stake. And as soon as we have staking, we also get the rewards. So it's you know, trying to find a middle ground between getting to cover the costs at least, and then, you know, also investing in the project.
Great feedback, and I appreciate that encouragement. That's a really great point, because we're not using inflation and we have an economic model that is designed to be sustainable as a distributed business model. Any other questions? Red, I think I saw you unmute.
Yeah. I appreciate what Joseph said. I wanted to make the same compliment. Will be interesting to see how this will progress based on the fees that are shared. And I want to respond to what you said, early Bitcoin miners. I think that was a different era. Now we're running 7 days a week, 24 hours a day teams, professionals that are not doing this in the evening hours, but professionals that want to make a living of this and invest and build this community. So as EOS Amsterdam, we see that as a business. I'm hiring Stan to provide value to the communities that we support. And we are not being paid right now on mainnet, EOS mainnet. And when we were being paid there, a big part of the revenue was shared because we had to give back 80% of the rewards to the voters. So a very lucrative business model. Being a block producer, it's never been a very lucrative business model. Somehow you always need a little bit of money just when the exchange rate is low. So I've been, I don't know, maybe gambling wrong when I needed to convert to some euros because I had to pay some bills. But somehow it's always on the lowest point. So yeah, I would recommend the FIO to add something to the deposit again. It's a little bit strange as a block producer to say what you want. It's more the return. You are hiring us as a block producer, so I feel that the foundation needs to set the pricing. Depending on that, we can supply capacity. As I said, I'm hiring Stan and others to do work for us. So depending on how much money we get, we can put so much energy in it. The last thing I want to say is that investing in FIO, I have a big question mark there. I think at the end, when this really starts to fly, I think exchanges have a better position than we have to get votes from the users. So, or the wallets have more possibility to get the votes of the users. So in maybe 3 years time, the top 21 of FIO will be exchanges and wallets. So then I feel risk. I feel more risk than, for example, with Wax, where I don't think exchanges have an advantage. In FIO, I think exchanges have an advantage because it's really tied to the wallets and to the exchanges. So
yeah, that's really
for
good.
us,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so for us, it's key that if we want to continue, it needs to be in balance with the investments that we make. And if you say, okay, yeah, well, in the future we'll have the revenues, I have a big question mark with that. So my preference would be that we are getting paid for the work that we do now. So if you want Stan to spend energy on it, then I have to pay Stan. and out of the FIO protocol needs some revenue to be able to do that. And I also have the feeling that we're only starting to engage with the community. So reaching out to smaller exchanges like in Europe, there's a lot of smaller local exchanges. We haven't been doing that so much yet because I still feel that it still needs some adoption before it's more easy to get those local exchanges. If a Binance adopts FIO, then also those local exchanges will follow more easy. They will not take a leading role. They can't make an impact. They know that they can't make an impact.
Definitely. So we only got like 2 minutes left. So I want to make sure you made one comment that I want to be really careful about, in that the foundation doesn't employ you to, we're not like, some chains are permissioned. Wax, for example, there have been others as well, where they directly choose the block producers, and then from that mechanism, they essentially pay them. This chain is paying you. The foundation is not paying you. And that is an important, strategically designed system. This is a DAC model. It's decentralized, it's autonomous. The fees on chain are where all your rewards come from. Yes, the Genesis block entrusted the foundation with community resources, but that's to, provide for all that software you just saw, that we just did in the first part of this call. Without that, that work probably wouldn't be done at that level. So there is a multiple approach to this. One is that we all look at this as a distributed business model that we're all part of. The foundation has a key role, of course, and you all have a key role as well. And you're exactly right as far as the adoption part of it. The major exchanges, and we have actually three more that I can't talk about yet. One has already announced, Liquid, which we're on, has already announced they're doing a FIO integration. Stay tuned, because that's very, very close. And there's a couple more that have not announced that I can't talk about. And so yes, we are working hard. Our business development team is working hard, and we would love your engagement on that part of the process as well to help with that. Those integrations are really important for our shared growth. You made another comment that I thought was important, and I appreciate we are in a different time. This is different than Bitcoin mining. These are professional teams that need to be supported well. And another part to that I've been thinking about, and I'm glad you mentioned Stan specifically, because he has continued to provide a great value for our team. And I do think, and this may be a little different than some of the other chains, I do think there's an opportunity for block producers to submit worker proposals. If you're going above and beyond, and you're literally like engaging with the developers and helping to write code and things of that nature, I'm open to evaluating those with the steering committee. So that's like potentially another way to offset your costs, right, in that particular example. But as far as the subsidies go, we have to think holistically of the whole tokenomics model, right? Where we are now and where we need to go. And part of that includes thinking through how we're all incentivized to grow the network and grow the system. And as you'll notice, there's a lot of people that have been more active this past week because they're like, wait a minute, what happened? And that's, as an entrepreneur myself, I know that that's important at times to drive you to put in more effort because you want to see the result you want. Whereas if you're just getting paid regardless, it's like, well, I could just chill a little bit, right? So I want to find that balance where that, and also the risk you mentioned is important too. One of the reasons we talked about block producer service providers, which I know is a very controversial topic early on, was for exactly the reason you mentioned. I purposely asked many of you to be on this team because I know the technical excellence you bring to EOS.IO production. And I don't have that same level of confidence or personal relationship with the exchanges and wallets, right? So in that scenario, I would continue to push that they would employ you essentially, which sounds kind of like what you were asking for anyway. Stable revenue to cover your costs, cover your, pay your employees, and bring you some profit as a company. So I think that model may actually be more of what some of you prefer, whereas others want to take the risk and rise and fall with the tides. So even and I think you're accurate that the wallets and exchanges as a decentralized autonomous consortia of industry leaders are going to have a good position here. And I want you all to continue to be involved. So go ahead, VT.
So first of all, I always enjoy joining these calls, and it's a lot of good feedback from everyone. I do, however, kind of want to understand, like, So you said earlier on that we were a bit off when it came to the number of transactions we were expecting versus how much we have today. Because right now I just made a quick calculation. It's like we're making around $15 a day on FIO on current price, which is obviously it could easily 10x, who knows, right? But that is the situation we have today. We're making $15 per day. I think we're allowed 24 people in this group. I don't think anyone would sell our hour 1 hour for $15 even. So it is heavily underpaid, given that our knowledge is very scarce globally. So although we could go for a smaller period of time, making $15 per day, but I think if that's going to be something that's going to be long term, I think people will lose interest. And we keep talking about community, and yes, community is super important. But right now, the community is us, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there super excited about FIO. But right now it's us, and we might be the only ones incentivized to spread the word. And I do think that, although I understand that $15 is what we have today, how do you think that will change over time without speculating on token price?
You know,
I think that's exactly why we're having these meetings, to be able to recognize that something does need to be done. And I think I'm in agreement with you. And probably done relatively quickly. We don't want to continue something that's not profitable. And at the same time, I do want to have some very open conversations about what has been done. Was $280 a day maybe too much at the level we are as a subsidy, for the network? So these are the types of conversations I want to have.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah.
I was just mention, like the idea that how I have envisioned the economics behind the token distribution is now that we're at a point where we're not emitting as much into the supply, and the idea is we're not really busting out as many windows, and that $15 a day that you're making should technically increase over time. That was my expectation early on. Now we did have this expectation there would be a lot more transactions on the network that would allow the producers to collect most of their tokens in fees collected from the chain. But now we are at this point, how you want to go about being reimbursed as producers. I want everyone to go ahead, and I want to mention again, I put this idea out in the block producers chat and Discord, a short, simple way we could get the tokens back to the producers, but also be able to manage them in a way where they can last longer and not emit into supply as fast. So I'd encourage everyone to have a look at that. As Luke, I think Luke had mentioned that earlier, but my advice would be, to not try and write it out. We should try and move on and put something in there. So not to, as BTS said, we don't want to see producers leave.
Maybe just add a small bucket now while we try to get the solution, because we are not going to fix it next week on the other one. Maybe, I think that involving staking, it might be a good solution, but this might take like 2 months, 3 months to get it done. So I don't know, maybe, just a little bit now, keep the conversation open, active. Let's set goals. Like we have to get a final decision in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks, whatever it takes. And we all have to be involved until we got this solution.
Yep, I think that's a great point, is let's set some goals and some deadlines for the actual decision process and the conversation. Because, I actually was up last night writing some code evaluating token transfers, and I'm very interested in the next major token unlock coming here in a number of days. And I'm just curious, how have our investors acted on the previous unlocks? How will they act on this unlock? And I'm also, haven't yet, but I'm going to do the same analysis on our BPs. How much of the BP rewards are having to be sold into exchanges, for example, and thinking about that on-chain data will hopefully, combined with the evaluation of the payments that have already been made, will hopefully bring us to a place where we can come to an agreement to say, okay, maybe the subsidy was a bit high, maybe it was just right, you know, wherever it needs to be. And then I think that would be part of something going forward. So we say, and also too, it's important to recognize that these tokens were minted. So it's not like we can just like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pablo, we can't just like move tokens to a bucket and have it start working again. So we'd have to actually do some code development as well to get this kind of running again. And potentially that would mean burning some tokens in order to make them, and then adjusting some configurations in the chain with the multi-sig to make it start emitting again. So those are the conversations that we can have. And we're already over time. I hate to go late, so I apologize for keeping you late. Really appreciate your time. I'm happy to continue talking if you want, but I want to respect everyone's time, and we can keep this conversation going in Discord and Telegram as well. But let me set some deadlines for our conversation on this particular topic, and set some frameworks for how we can, you know, start outlining our options, and then we can kind of structure the conversation a little more clearly. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And also just want to kind of add what you think is reasonable for only a block producer to make, like a block producer only, because then that also sets the expectations from our side. I know we're not employed by you, but in a way we kind of are. So if you think $300 per day is too much, which I personally don't think, then what is a good number for you? Because we always have to look at the risk reward, right? The only reason why we're here is because we like you. That's, to be honest, that's why we joined. I think most of us in here joined for the same reason. But we do, as the rest also pointed out earlier, we are trying to run a business as well. We're a bit, you know, goofy, and we do stuff that are not always profitable. But in the end, they need to be profitable, at least have a profitable outlook. So it's good for us to know, what do you think is reasonable? Because obviously I don't think $15 is reasonable, but also I'm also maybe a little bit more, you know, understanding than, because we're not, this won't make it or break it for us, but for other people that are in the position where they need to pay stuff, I understand. I would definitely start looking for other options if I knew the long-term output is $15 per day. I would hire everyone in here to do nothing for $15 per day. It's like, this is a bunch of the most advanced and the most technically capable people within the ESIO community. I mean, they can do miracles for $15 a day. So I'm just kind of putting things in perspective.
Absolutely. And I
sorry
know
for my Swedish straightforwardness.
No, it's beautiful. I love it. You know, I love it. You know, I love it. We've had amazing conversations in many places in the world, and I super appreciate you getting right to the point. And I agree completely. I frankly don't know if $70,000, you know, for the last, you know, 9 months or 8 months or whatever it's been, is appropriate or not. That's a conversation that I deeply want to have, and I'm trusting all of us to be meritocratic in our thinking, to be like, I want to reward people who are adding value appropriately and honoring those taking the risk, because I want you to be well rewarded. And I loved in the early on, man, the stories that I was hearing. This is the most amazing chain we've ever been a block producer on, because we're getting paid right out of the bat on a real token that has Binance exchange support. You know, this is like nothing we've ever seen in any USIO chain. You know how exciting that was for me to hear my friends tell me, hey, we're here not just because you're cool, but we're making money and it's awesome. Whereas no other chain we took a huge risk on. Some of those chains aren't even around today, and you know what I'm talking about. You know, it was a major investment of costs, and they got no returns, right? So I want to find the balance.
Yeah, look, regarding the 70K, you made some calculations, and what would be the money we got if we just sold the day we got it. But this is not how it works, right? So
I totally understand.
Sometimes, yeah, we sold because we needed the money, and we did it when it was high, and then I'm waiting because tomorrow will be more, and then it dipped 10%, and then you're still waiting, and then it dipped another 10%.
I totally get you. I've been in this space for I've been a block producer for like 3 or 4. Yeah,
but just saying that
it's just I need a. It's not perfect, but I need some benchmark, right? I need some way to say.
I understand, but now we're framing the conversation with this number, and it's not completely realistic, right? So just saying this, that it's different.
Well, I would propose, you know, we just get a simple MSIG out there, go and find some way to renew that amount, and then let them control the emission. That is, I think, the best way to go about it. You know, accelerate or decelerate the emission of the X amount of FIO tokens in reserve. We could do that really fast, right? That gets them paid, and then if you know they can collude or whatever, and see, okay, how do we come up with a reasonable price, and they can control the emission.
And to be clear, guys, to be really clear, I want to be really, really clear about this. And I know I appreciate we're over time here. I appreciate you guys' time. You guys can do whatever you want. The foundation has zero control over this chain. If you guys want to propose an MSIG to just pay yourself 3 times what you were getting before, you have every ability to do that, right? That's the reality of how this network operates. And you're all smart enough and understand economics enough to recognize why that may not be the best solution long-term for your well-being, right? And the foundation is here as an advisor. Obviously, we're a community treasury, so we have a lot of responsibility. But ultimately, the hope is that we can come to an agreement where we can be very confidently promoting this to the outside community, to our wallets, to our exchanges. You guys get 85% of the fees. They get, you know, a smaller portion. And so the decisions we make, hopefully, are done in that light, that there's a larger community of people impacted by this, and we want to come up with something that makes sense, and we want to keep you guys well incentivized. So, Vahid, I think you make a really good point, and you do as well, Joseph, that, you know, the numbers I'm throwing out there are just, you know, the best wet finger in the air I have, and it's based on the day that it's kind of like what your taxes would be, right? It's the day that you receive the token at the price of the token at that day, right? But then we have to go deeper to say, okay, with all the speculation, with all the other concerns, you know, what is the proper approach to say, this is really exciting, and I want to continue to not only be a block producer, but I want to start promoting it more, getting more involved, making sure I can increase my own revenue as an entrepreneur by having mechanisms to run my own FIO registration website, for example. Instead of selling tokens on the market, maybe I'm, you know, letting people give me Bitcoin directly to register FIO addresses right on my own FIO registration website. We'd love to see more BPs doing that, you know, and other different marketing activities and other things to promote this, not just within the EOS.IO community, but the whole community. So I would love some, you know, input and ideas as we're continuing the conversation about the best framework to have that discussion about what you guys need, and then, you know, what makes sense going forward. And again, you know, propose MSIGs as well, and the foundation can comment on them. That's another opportunity as well for you guys to get involved. You control this chain ultimately, and we recognize that, you know. So again, I do apologize going 15 minutes late. I normally like to keep it real strict on time, but I know this is a really important issue for you guys. It directly impacts your pay. And I'm happy to even schedule another BP call if that makes sense. If this was helpful to have this format for this type of discussion, I'm happy to have, you know, another call if that's useful. Otherwise, we can continue in Discord and Telegram.
I think that it does. And I just want to point out that I think this leads into a bigger conversation, because this also impacts the entire idea of staking. I mean, if you look at the amount of fees generated right now, and us as BPs talking about what that means for our pay, you have to consider that like 10% of that will end up going to the staking pool, and it might make staking not even worth it. So whatever, like the idea of the foundation injecting funds into the reserve is a Band-Aid, and there are bigger conversations that need to be happened about, you know, how do we draw this out for more years?
And they are happening. Or rest assured, they're definitely happening. And that is a Band-Aid, for sure. Cool. Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, maybe there needs to be a topic held about inflation. Like when we're talking about staking, that's the number one thing that sticks in my head often, is that if you look at Bitcoin, for example, like their end goal is to have the network operate based on fees, but look at how long that schedule is. You know, it's a halving every 4 years that ends up being like decades. We've been doing this for 9 months, and we're already at that point now where we're operating on fees. So realistically, we need to end up somewhere in between those two values, and we need to have some sort of long-term method.
Some kind of inflation that goes down until,
Maybe. It's a conversation worth talking about.
It's a good example.
David could probably chime in here with some of his thoughts. David and Pablo was kind of the, you know, founders of some of the original ideas that ended up making their way into mainnet, and the community ended up launching. One of them being the 12.5%, the 125 million tokens set aside for free address giveaways. You know, that idea that we were just going to give away a whole bunch of addresses through all of our integration partners, and that was going to create incredible demand and excitement for the project, the network, the token, and everything in between. That it was asked earlier, about the assumptions made. I think that was one of them that wasn't exactly there. And we also recognize by giving away free FIO addresses in some ways, again, through a subsidy, you're potentially harming one aspect of the economics where people don't value what they're getting. And so then why would they go buy one? Because it's like, I can just get one for free, no big deal, right? So that 12.5%, that 125 million tokens was already the bucket we started thinking about that we would potentially pull from and reallocate in like a co-op model or potentially a staking model. So maybe that's part of the conversation where, just like with Bitcoin, where you have, inflation of sorts, we have these tokens that are currently not being used for anything and potentially might be introduced into the network, just like a block reward, as you described, Aaron. I think that's a great framework to discuss it.
Yeah, we can follow that up on maybe another call about this topic and kind of just look at the overall tokenomics, because it does impact all of us here in terms of block producer rewards, but it also really affects staking and any other form of co-op model. I mean, if we want to incentivize people to hold tokens, that needs to be a meaningful amount to encourage that. So yeah, more conversations to be had.
Definitely. And I so appreciate you guys. You are the leading edge of the community for sure. And there are also others that we're talking to about these tokenomics models. How do we focus? We kind of did the classic technology focused company engineers, we build the technology and it's awesome and everyone's going to love us for it, without recognizing some people talk about, well, your token is your product also. Like, this is part of your community. This is how you're incentivized. This is how you support the security of the network. Thinking about how the community thinks about the value of the network, for example, hasn't been a focus of ours. And we've, in the last 3 to 4 weeks, our business development team and PR and marketing has really shifted a bit to recognize this is a conversation that we've not done a great job of as the foundation perpetuating in this space. And that is, I just had 2 calls today with 2 marketing firms, for example, that work in tokenomics, and I've got more coming, and we've got a lot of really cool ideas that we're thinking through. Others that couldn't be on the call today that are part of the team have worked with large chains that you all know of and done some really cool stuff. So we are thinking about that, Aaron, and it's exactly right. The tokenomics conversation is important, and we are having those now because we're stepping back going, this is going to take a long time, based on this model. And the 10-year example with Bitcoin is a good one. And so we've got to create the runway for all of you and the foundation and everyone else involved to be able to be well-funded to get there. So again, I apologize for going over, but I think this is a super important conversation. Really appreciate all you guys' time. Any other last minute comments before we go? All right, excellent. Thank you guys again so much. And again, if you want to have another call scheduled, we can do that. And I hope we can continue the conversation in Discord and Telegram as well. And super appreciate you guys. And thank you so much for the compliments. I like that you're here because you like me and I'm a neat guy, but I also want you guys to run really awesome businesses and to grow this decentralized business model, because I think it's a cool idea. We're helping make crypto easier, and hopefully we're doing it while we get paid. So that would be cool. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, and I want to say on the way out, thank you so much. So many people have helped me over the last week or so with so many different things. It's been just amazing. So thank you guys.
Thank you guys. Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.